Every night, while we sleep peacefully, someone, somewhere, is living through something they never imagined, even in their worst nightmares. These stories aren't fiction, they're the chilling truth of what real people have faced. Are you ready for the moments that might just make you afraid to sleep alone tonight? This happened to a young man who had moved to a new city for work. He rented a small room in an old apartment building, nothing fancy, but enough to sleep and survive. Every night when he returned from work, he'd feel a strange heaviness the moment he entered the room, almost as if someone else was already inside, watching silently. At first, he ignored it, blaming work stress and the unfamiliar environment. But then things started getting worse. He'd often find his belongings slightly moved. One night, the lights flickered violently. Thinking it was a power issue, he brushed it off, until he saw it. In the corner of his room stood a figure. Pale. Still. Just staring at him. Frozen with fear, he couldn't even scream. He shut his eyes tightly, and when he opened them, it was gone. The next morning, he convinced himself it was sleep paralysis. But that night, it came closer. He finally called a local spiritual healer. When the healer entered the room, he didn't say a word for several minutes, just stood still, then finally muttered, "You've brought something with you. And it doesn't want to leave." The young man packed his bags that same night and never returned to that apartment again. What if the voice calling your name wasn't human? This isn't just a ghost story. It's what happened when a woman heard something that shouldn't have been possible, and made the mistake of answering. This happened to a woman who lived alone in a small apartment on the 3rd floor. Life was normal, until one rainy night, everything changed. She was brushing her hair in front of the mirror when she suddenly heard someone whisper her name. It was faint, but clear. And it came from inside the room. Startled, she turned, but no one was there. She checked every corner, even opened the closet. Nothing. Trying to stay calm, she told herself it was just her imagination. Maybe the rain, maybe the wind. But deep down, she felt something was off. The next night, it happened again. This time, the whisper was louder. And it wasn't just her name, it said. "I see you." Her blood ran cold. She didn't sleep that night. Things escalated. Lights would flicker. Doors opened slightly on their own. But the worst part, the mirror. One night, she saw a shape standing behind her in the reflection. But when she turned around, nothing. Terrified, she covered every mirror in the house and slept with the lights on. Finally, she reached out to an old woman in her neighborhood rumored to be a spiritual guide. The woman didn't even enter the house. She stood at the threshold, stared at the room, and whispered, "It's not your home anymore." The woman moved out the very next day. She never found out what it was. And she never went back. They say children can see what adults cannot. But what if your child starts talking to someone who doesn't exist? What this couple discovered will chill you to your core. A young couple had just moved into their new home with their 4-year-old daughter. It was a peaceful neighborhood, and the house seemed perfect, until their daughter made an unusual comment. She pointed to an empty corner of the room and said cheerfully, "That's where the man sits." At first, they laughed it off. Kids have wild imaginations, right? But as days passed, their daughter kept mentioning the man. She'd say things like, "He doesn't like it when you close the window." Or, "He told me not to talk to you about him." Now it wasn't so funny. One evening, they overheard her whispering in her room. When they peeked inside, she was facing the corner, nodding and responding, like someone was really there. The father asked gently, "Sweetheart, who are you talking to?" She turned to them and said with a blank expression, "The man. He says you're not listening." That night, the temperature in the house dropped drastically. Lights began flickering. The dog barked at that same corner, growling like it saw something invisible. The parents finally brought in a medium. After walking through the house in silence, the medium stopped in the child's room and whispered, "He never left this place. And your daughter is the only one who sees him." The family moved out within the week. They never spoke about it again. But their daughter? She still sometimes looks at empty corners and smiles. What would you do if a stranger kept calling your name in the middle of the night, but no one was ever there? This woman's terrifying experience will make you question what you hear in the dark. A woman living alone in a quiet apartment started experiencing something strange. Every night, right around 3 a.m., she'd wake up to the sound of her name being whispered, softly, but clearly. Sarah. At first, she thought it was a dream. Maybe she was imagining it. But then it happened again. And again. Always at the same time. Always in the same tone, slow, chilling, and just loud enough to wake her. One night, she decided to stay awake. She sat in bed waiting. And then, exactly at 3 a.m., she heard it again. Sarah. But this time, it was coming from the hallway. Trembling, she stepped out of her bedroom, phone in hand, flashlight on. No one. The apartment was silent. She started recording every night. When she played back the audio, she heard something that made her blood run cold. The voice didn't just call her name, it whispered, "Come closer." She reported it to the building manager, thinking maybe someone was messing with her. But the manager said, "You live at the end of the hallway. There's no apartment next to you, just the old storage unit. And no one's been in there for years." Desperate, she had a priest come and bless the apartment. The whispers stopped for a few days. But then, they returned. Louder. Angrier. Now, they weren't just whispering, they were screaming her name. The final night, she didn't wait to find out what would happen next. She left everything behind and never returned to that apartment. To this day, no one knows where the voice came from. But that hallway? It's still sealed off. They say mirrors are just reflections, but what if yours moved on its own? This story isn't about what was seen in the mirror, it's about what stepped out of it. A couple had just moved into their new home, a charming old house with wooden floors, antique furniture, and an ornate, full-length mirror left behind by the previous owners. The mirror was beautiful, but odd. Its frame was carved with strange symbols. They placed it in the hallway and didn't think much of it. Until one night, the wife was walking past the mirror, and she noticed something strange. Her reflection blinked. But she hadn't. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light. But it kept happening. Subtle, almost unnoticeable, until it wasn't. One evening, she stood still and watched closely. Her reflection began to move on its own. It tilted its head slowly, and smiled. That night, she told her husband. He laughed it off. But the next morning, he found deep scratches running down the mirror's surface, from the inside. He tried to cover it with a sheet, but the sheet would be thrown off by morning. Soon, the house felt wrong. The air became heavier. Shadows stretched too far. Doors opened on their own. One night, while lying in bed, they both heard a sound, a faint tapping. It was coming from the hallway. Tap. 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 He grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. There, in front of the covered mirror, the sheet was gone. And their reflections were standing still, but smiling wider than humanly possible. The couple didn't wait another night. They smashed the mirror to pieces and burned every last shard. But sometimes, just sometimes, they still hear the tapping, even though the mirror is gone. He was just passing through a village. One stop. One night. But something there wouldn't let him leave. What he saw in that house still haunts him today. A man was traveling alone through the countryside when night fell unexpectedly. With no hotels around, a kind old villager offered him shelter for the night in a nearby empty house. The place was dusty, old, and oddly cold, but better than sleeping outside. As he settled in, the old man gave him one warning. "Don't open the window after midnight. No matter what you hear." He laughed nervously. Probably just superstition, he thought. At exactly 12:15 a.m., he heard it, soft knocking on the window behind him. Tap, tap, tap. Ignoring it, he turned away, but the knocking grew louder, more urgent. Then it stopped. Silence. Until a whisper broke it. "Please let me in." He froze. Every instinct told him not to turn around. But curiosity won. He peeked through the curtain. There was a woman standing outside, face pale, eyes empty, smiling. But her feet weren't touching the ground. Heart racing, he backed away. Then came a bang. The window shook violently. "I saw you," she whispered again. He ran to the door, trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The window slowly creaked open on its own. She was crawling in, unnaturally, spider-like. In a panic, he recited a prayer his grandmother once taught him. Suddenly, the woman let out a shriek and vanished into thin air. The door unlocked. He bolted out, never once looking back. The next morning, the old man simply said, "You looked through the glass, didn't you?" And then he walked away. The traveler never took a shortcut through that village again. He heard whispers in a language he didn't understand, coming from inside his closet. But when he opened the door, what he found wasn't human. College student had recently moved into a shared apartment near his university. The room was cheap, a little too old, but manageable. Everything was fine for the first few days, until the whispers began. Late at night, just past 2 a.m., he would hear low murmurs coming from the closet in his room. At first, he thought it was his imagination, or maybe the neighbor's TV. But every night, the whispers got clearer. And they were always in a language he couldn't understand. Harsh, guttural, almost ancient. He mentioned it to his roommate, who laughed it off, saying, "That room's always been weird. The last guy moved out without taking his stuff." Curious, the student finally opened the closet fully one night, shining his phone's flashlight inside. In the back, hidden behind old coats, he found a strange symbol drawn in chalk, a circle filled with markings and lines. Beneath it was a tiny, rusted box. He opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, with writing in the same strange language he'd been hearing. The moment he touched it, the whispers stopped. But then something else began. The next night, he awoke to the closet door slowly creaking open on its own. And there, in the darkness, two eyes stared back at him, not glowing, not moving, just watching. He screamed, but no sound came out. The next morning, he found deep scratches inside the closet door, from the inside out. A priest was called. He refused to step into the room. "This isn't just haunted," he said. "Someone used this place to call something." The student moved out the same day, leaving everything behind. No one stays in that room anymore. And the landlord? He stopped renting it out, said the whispers never really stopped. Every story hides a secret. Some are forgotten over time. But some secrets come back. If these stories sent chills down your spine, just imagine how many are still untold, waiting in the dark. If you're brave enough to face the unknown, then subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most. And remember, the next mystery might be closer than you think. I'll return with another story. Until then, don't fall asleep.